Where does curiosity end and something else begin? It's a question that haunts the work of French photographer, installation, and conceptual artist Sophie Calle. In disguise, she once followed a man from Paris to Venice to assemble a photographic dossier of his life. Novelist Paul Auster was inspired to model one of his characters on her. Her current exhibit, Exquisite Pain, juxtaposes Calle's story of an emotional disaster in her own life with recollections by others of pain and heartache. Canape spies on the artist herself.
Exquisite Pain is a project that started 20 years ago. I was traveling through China, arrived in India, and received a message telling me that the man I lived with was breaking with me. And I had done a very exotic trip, so when I came back to France right after that, everybody asked me about those countries. And I was obsessed with that breakup, with that failure. So instead of telling people what had happened while traveling, I decided to tell the story of the breakup. And I thought that if I was telling that story over and over and over every day, I maybe would get bored of it and I would exhaust my pen through repetition. In the same time, I thought I could relativize my pen by comparing it to others. So I asked people to tell me in exchange of my story, to tell me what was the most unhappy moment of their life. And I thought I would do this until the day I would wake up or tired by my own story or finding it obscene compared to the pain of others. And it worked. 3 months later, I had stopped suffering. I asked people to tell me not always what really had happened, you know, but where did it happen, which day, what hour, why does it fall on you at the corner of 2 streets, a Tuesday at 5 o'clock. The first purpose of it was how to suffer less, how to get rid of it. And so that was the game in a way, like repeating and exchanging. It's a show which is in 2 parts. The first part is a kind of countdown to unhappiness from the day I left Paris. So each image, each document, letter, whatever I got, is stamped 92 days before unhappiness, 91 days, 90 days, etc., until 1 day to unhappiness, which is a telegram I received. And after the second part is it's after unhappiness, which is 5 days after, is a count up, let's say, which is the exchange of stories. I mean, my own story was extremely banal. It's just a story of a love breakup. The first day you tell a story, you are crying, it's long, you give a lot of details, and the more you install yourself in the story, the more it becomes a story. So you know how to make it economical, precise. You know when people are going to be surprised or laugh. So it becomes a fiction just because you keep repeating it, and because also the pen goes softer and softer until disappearing. So that's why I choose to my first story are broderies, white on gray. And the more the story gets short, economical, and dry in a way, the more it becomes short, and the more it becomes gray. At the end, you can hardly read the story because it's the broderies are gray on gray, and you can hardly see which correspond to what I was feeling, where it was just slowly erasing. Well, the relation to the audience is a relation to anybody. I want to be liked. Same way I want to be loved. I want people to like my work. I want my friends to like me. I want my lovers to love me. I mean, there is no, I would have nothing original to add to the basic feeling of, I mean, I'm not in search of enemies. Sometimes there is a link between my life and my heart, like here. Generally, it crosses my life when there is a failure, because happiness doesn't need to be maybe shared, failure maybe more.
Nominated for 7 César Awards in France, including Best Picture, Kings and Queen matched its critical success with box office clout. The story of 2 former lovers whose lives become intertwined again. It's been called by the Village Voice a towering tragicomedy, the art house equivalent of a blockbuster thrill ride. Mixing comedy, tragedy, and melodrama, director Arnaud Desplechin creates a portrait of urban family life that bears comparison with Woody Allen.
Non, je ne suis pas suicidaire, d'accord. Bon, je comprends, vous voyez la corde, la chaise, donc vous faites l'association, c'est humain, mais j'ai simplement besoin de savoir que je peux le faire, c'est juste une idée que j'ai besoin d'avoir, et du moment que je l'ai, je le ferai jamais. Je sais pas, il doit y avoir des choses comme ça dans Cicéron, ou Sénèque, ou les stoïciens. Franchement, je vais pas très bien en ce moment, mais je ne suis pas suicidaire. Bon, messieurs.
Ne me rendez pas la tâche plus difficile, s'il vous plaît.
Il va falloir y aller maintenant.
Vous allez pas monter de force.
Prends-lui la main.
Ok, allez hop. Non, allez.
To sum up, my new film it's funny. I mean, to say in very few lines, the plot is quite complicated but the film is quite simple in another way because it's 2 stories which are weaved together. One is a melodrama in a very Hollywoodian way, let's say a fairy tale, a dark fairy tale like a Hoffman tale or stuff like that, which would be the portrait of a woman, and the other one would be another kind of fairy tale, but a funny one, like a burlesque movie around a male character called Ismael. And so you have this portrait of Nora and the adventures of Ismael, and you are going back from the melodrama to the funny movie. And between the 2 of them, this woman and this man, there is a kid. And so at the very end of the film, the question would be the adoption of this kid.
Non. Non. Je comprends pas pourquoi tu demandes pas ça à ton nouveau mari. Pourquoi moi?
Elias t'aime énormément.
Si tu veux, mais tu en épouses un autre dans 15 jours, ton gangster. Et moi, je suis enfermé ici comme dingue. J'ai pas le droit de sortir, j'ai pas le droit de tirer de chèque. Ma puce, je comprends pas. Tu me lourdes et tu viens demander à un ex-amant d'adopter ton fils. On divorce, là.
On ne divorce pas, on n'a jamais été mariés.
Ne sois pas scabreuse, ça va, c'est pareil.
It was supposed to begin like a very simple movie. She's just buying, a gift for her father. She has to do a quick trip, for the birthday of her father and to be back with her son. And in the very first scene, she's buying a mythological image that she doesn't understand quite well.
Et la gravure a été passée en pastel, 19e.
Je vais la prendre pour offrir. Pour mon père.
Le reste déjà, c'est un livret, les galeries.
Il y a un an, j'ai divorcé de mon second mari, Ismaël. Et depuis, j'ai rencontré Jean-Jacques, un homme d'affaires qui m'aime passionnément. Il m'a demandé ma main, très officiellement, la semaine dernière.
And on the opposite side, on the burlesque movie, so the story is about Ismael, who's playing by Mathieu Amalric and who is in a psychiatric hospital. So it could sound like a realistic movie, but strangely, the psychiatric hospital, Catherine Deneuve, is running this hospital. So everything starts to be magic, just like in a sort of Shakespearean comedy,
Vous pensez que c'est forcément malveillant?
Mais madame, je n'ai pas de troubles psychiatriques ou vos conneries de je ne sais pas quoi.
Je vois que vous suivez une psychanalyse depuis 8 ans. 3 séances par semaine. Vous avez l'air en détresse.
Oui, c'est mon âme qui me fait souffrir. Ça, vous n'y pouvez rien.
Et pourquoi je n'y peux rien?
Bien parce que vous êtes une femme.
Et alors?
Excusez-moi, mais les femmes, c'est pas pareil que les hommes.
C'est-à-dire?
Vous n'avez pas d'âme.
Parce que je suis une femme.
Ne me regardez pas comme ça, ce n'est pas de ma faute. Vous avez déjà vu une femme prêtre ou une femme rabbin? Bon. Je ne dis pas, vous avez sûrement autre chose à la place, mais enfin, je me vois mal parler de mon âme avec vous.
Un peu insultant pour les femmes, non?
Mais non, les hommes, ça vit sur une droite. Et les femmes, vous vivez dans des bulles, je ne sais pas, des petites bulles où vous devez passer de l'une à l'autre, où il doit y avoir des intersections. Ça doit être des petites bulles de temps, j'imagine. Et nous, les hommes, on vit sur une droite, une seule ligne, on vit pour mourir.
Et les femmes, elles vivent pour quoi?
Pour rien. Vous vivez, quoi.
I think it was our way to be truer, you know, instead of being realistic, to use all these images that you know by heart when you're a kid, you know, because when you're a kid you're surrounded by mythology. And I love to make portraits of bold girls and harsh men, you know, and so it's good fights, you know, between the male characters and the female characters. I thought it was more lively. Just be brutal, brutally tragic, you know, as life is, and let's be brutally comical, you know, because that's how life is, and that's how films have to be, you know, intense, you know, more intense.
Je regarde Elias et Ismaël s'approcher et je pense que la vie est étrange. J'ai aimé 4 hommes, j'en ai tué 2. Et cela ne signifie rien, je n'éprouve pas de remords. Les 2 autres hommes marchent vers moi. Je sais qu'ils me survivront, et cela suffit à mon bonheur. Le cycle du malheur s'est arrêté.
In the late 18th century, a revolution took place that changed the shape of the Americas. Yet it wasn't the French or the American Revolution, it was the Haitian Revolution, the most successful slave rebellion in history. It was a bloody 13-year struggle that put on alert all other slave-owning territories in the New World. Chosen by the Los Angeles Times as the best nonfiction book of 2004, Avengers of the New World tells the story of the creation of the first Black Republic. Historian Laurent Dubois talks with Canape about an important story too little known.
So this book tells the story of the Haitian Revolution, which is the only successful slave revolution in the history of the world. This is a revolution that began in Saint-Domingue, which is a French colony, and led to the creation of a new state, and in the process destroyed the system of slavery. It is the only example of a successful slave revolt. We have many revolts in the United States. All of them get crushed, and elsewhere as well. What happens in Saint-Domingue is particularly unique, and it's also important to remember that it happened in the most profitable plantation society in the Americas. This was a colony that was more profitable to France than the Northern American colonies together had been to Britain before the American Revolution. Because of that, it had a huge population of Africans. In fact, the majority of the population at the time of the Revolution were African-born. The system was so brutal and so deadly to slaves that they were simply replenished by bringing them from Africa. And that's part of the story of the success, is that these people brought political ideologies, they brought military tactics, they brought religious traditions and so forth that enabled them to set in motion this revolution. But it's also crucial to think about the ways it was connected to the French Revolution. And the French Revolution does open up possibilities. It doesn't cause the Haitian Revolution by any means, but it is important to understand how the two revolutions are connected, and I don't think either one could have really taken the course they did without the other. The free people of color were a central part of this story, and the free people of color are often misunderstood. This is a term that in the United States, of course, has different ramifications. This was a group of people who were often very educated. Many had been educated in France. Many of them were quite wealthy, and many of them owned slaves. So there were people of African descent, sometimes mixed European and African ancestry, like Alexandre Dumas or like other famous members of the Francophone world. But many of them also owned slaves. So they were committed, many of them were committed to fight racism, and yet not committed necessarily to fighting slavery. Although in the end, many of them do join ultimately in the struggle for Haitian independence, ultimately. The question of the role of voodoo in the revolution is central. One of the problems, of course, is that voodoo is, I would say, doesn't really exist as such before the revolution. In some ways, the revolution makes or helps to create what we know of as Haitian voodoo through what it does. But certainly, the multiple religious traditions that people are practicing in this colony at the time of the revolution, which include West African, Congolese, mixed with various vernacular forms of Catholicism and so forth, are central. It had a political meaning, a spiritual meaning, it provided hope, it provided inspiration, and it provided community, as I said. And all those were central when we think about the success of the first wave of the revolution, is to have unified across these sugar plantations, and essentially within a few days to have destroyed sugar plantations across the entire northern plain. And that was a brilliant feat of organizing. The title of the book is based on a writing by Louis-Sébastien Mercier, an 18th century scribbler, a kind of 18th century writer of fairly well known, who wrote a wonderful book in 1771 that essentially the idea is that he goes to sleep and he wakes up 672 years later, and he finds the world has been completely transformed. And one of the things that he sees is a statue to a strong, imposing black man who's sort of standing in a plaza, and underneath this statue it says, "To the Avenger of the New World." I was interested in this quote because it showed that although this was rather minority view, there were some thinkers in the 18th century who were predicting in some ways that there might be a revolution among the slaves. They didn't really want this to happen, but this was a way of warning whites that if they didn't do something about slavery, ultimately the violence of slavery would come back to haunt them. And I pair it at the beginning of the book with an epigraph from Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who after Haitian independence, in explaining what he had done and how he had massacred certain whites after independence, said, "I have avenged America." And what he was speaking about there was that he, in a sense, taken vengeance not just for slaves, but also for the indigenous people, a kind of vengeance against European colonialism in the hopes of creating something new. So that's, the title plays on both of those quotes.
From Laurel and Hardy to Oscar and Felix of The Odd Couple, comic buddy movies are an enduring tradition. Add now to the gallery of characters Antoine, played by Daniel Auteuil, a maitre d' who saves lovelorn Louis, played by José Garcia, from suicide and decides to help him back into life. In comedy, help seldom travels in a straight line. In the capable hands of director Pierre Salvadori, the road to happiness turns into a labyrinth of comic errors. The filmmaker talks to Canape about the amusing dangers of good intentions.
This is a story of a guy who is a waiter in a big restaurant in Paris. He's a maître d'hôtel, and he has this feeling that he has the feeling that he has always to take care of other people. You know, like he feels responsible for everyone. And he's a waiter in this hotel, and one day, as he's crossing a big park in Paris at night, he's running, he's late, and he bumped into a guy who is about to commit suicide, to hang himself.
In the most romantic city in the world, Luis was about to become another casualty of love, until fate intervened. Now, Antoine is giving Luis a fresh start. A good meal. A new job at the restaurant.
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Bonjour. And a new lease on life.
Sometimes you are good to people because you look at yourself being good, and it's an image, and it's something that c'est quelque chose de gratifiant, on se voit en quelqu'un de généreux, mais au fond c'est quelqu'un qui, I mean, it's someone, when he saved this guy at the beginning, it's a reflex. He does it by a reflex. And then he's going to save him maybe 100 times during the movie until he understands exactly what it means, what he has done, which is, I think, the main purpose of the movie. It's about doing something in your life for free, for nothing, and that, in a way, transcend your life. And the bet that if you do that, in a way or another, there are going to be a payback. You're going to have something from that, to gain something from that.
But when Antoine goes looking for Luis's lost love...
Mademoiselle, madame?
Mademoiselle.
Mademoiselle, mademoiselle?
Oui.
He'll find himself in the middle of a sticky situation.
Comedy is really difficult to accomplish. You know, I realized that because I made a film noir before this one, and I forgot how comedy was difficult to do. You know, comedy, it's a question of timing. Sometimes the actors don't have to play in the most realistic way. You write your script, and you know that there is only one way to be to do it, just one way. And if the actor is overacting, suddenly it's going to be vulgar or obscene. If he's under il s'il est en dessous, it's going to be flat and it won't do anything. So you have to tell them sometimes stupid things like, if you just wait 2 seconds before saying the answer, you're saying your dialogue, it's going to be funnier.
This summer, there's only one woman who can raise Luisa's spirits, stir Antoine's passions, and really turn up the heat.
What I love about comedy is that most of the time characters are ambiguous, complex. They are going to say one thing, but they are going to think exactly the contrary. They are going to say, I'm going to do that, and they will do that. They are lying all the time. And in a way, they are poetic reflect of the human condition, you know. There is so many truths sometimes in comedy, so many truths in comedy.
From renowned director Pierre Salvadori comes a delicious romantic comedy that will leave audiences everywhere asking for more. Paramount Classics presents 3 of France's most celebrated actors, Daniel Auteuil, José Garcia, and Sandrine Kiberlin, in Après Vous.
How do you name something new? Master French abstract artist Pierre Soulages calls his new work Outre Noir, a light transmitted by black. For him, it's another country, another mental field than that of simply black. The octogenarian artist, who hasn't exhibited in New York for over 30 years, is enjoying a double showing of his works at Haim Channon Fine Arts and Robert Miller Gallery. He takes time from his busy schedule to chat with Canape.
Il y a en ce moment 2 expositions de moi à New York. Ici, à la galerie Haim Channon, une exposition d'œuvres sur papier, au bout de noix, et puis une exposition de peinture, de grands tableaux qui se trouvent à la galerie Robert Miller, où il y a des tableaux qui ont certains 3,25 mètres de haut. C'est de grandes toiles. Et autant à la galerie Robert Miller, j'utilise le reflet de la peinture sur le noir, la lumière réfléchie par des états de surface de la couleur noire, plus ou moins striée, plus ou moins plane, plus ou moins... Autant ici, il s'agit d'une conception plus traditionnelle où le noir et les couleurs sombres sont vues soit par transparence, soit par contraste avec un clair ou avec une couleur sombre. Le bordeaux noir est une matière que j'ai utilisée depuis toujours, depuis mon enfance. Et quand j'avais 4 ans, c'est-à-dire en 1924 ou 5 ans, j'aimais cette chose-là et je travaillais avec. Et c'était une couleur qu'employaient en général les ébénistes et les menuisiers pour colorer le bois. Et ça me plaisait. Et puis c'était très, très facile, c'est une couleur très bon marché. Les choses qu'il y a ici, la plupart, oui, sont faites avec des bouts de bois, des racles, plus que des brosses. Quand je me suis aperçu finalement que toutes les brosses qu'on avait avaient un programme qui était sous-entendu, déjà naturellement, moi j'avais utilisé ce qui me tombait sous la main et qui me paraissait produire les formes qui me touchaient, qui m'intéressaient, qui provoquaient en moi une dynamique de l'imagination et un plaisir, qui est celui de la peinture. Et le noir est une couleur très puissante, très active, qui a toujours été au centre de ce que j'ai fait. J'utilise la lumière réfléchie par l'état de surface de la couleur noire. C'est ce que j'ai appelé outre-noir. Outre-noir, comme on dit outre-Atlantique, outre-Rhin, pour désigner un autre pays. Et si j'ai appelé ça outre-noir, c'est-à-dire au-delà du noir, c'est pour désigner aussi un autre pays, un autre champ mental que celui du simple noir. Ce que l'on voit, c'est une lumière qui vient du mur, du tableau, vers celui qui regarde. Par conséquent, l'espace du tableau est devant la toile, alors que traditionnellement, il se trouve dans la peinture traditionnelle sur le mur ou au-delà du mur, dans le cas de la perspective, dans le cas des profondeurs illusoires. Mais là, d'une manière concrète, réelle, qu'est-ce qu'on voit? C'est de la lumière qui vient de la toile vers vous. L'espace de la toile est devant la toile, et vous qui la regardez, vous êtes dans cet espace-là. Et ça, c'est nouveau. C'est une conception nouvelle de la peinture dont la photographie ne peut pas rendre compte. Mais enfin, on photographie quand même, ne serait-ce que pour différencier plusieurs choses semblables. Et puis le noir, vous savez, est entaché toujours de connotations culturelles différentes. En Occident, ça veut dire plusieurs choses. En Occident, ça veut dire quelquefois le deuil, quelquefois la révolte, le noir, du blouson noir de Marlon Brando dans L'équipe est sauvage, le noir de l'anarchie, mais c'est aussi le noir de l'officialité. Les officiels, la solennité, c'est en noir. Et d'ailleurs, je me demande pourquoi le noir a tellement... je me pose la question, pourquoi est-ce que cela nous concerne aussi fortement? Peut-être est-ce aussi parce que le noir, c'est la couleur fondamentale. C'est ce qui est arrivé avant toutes les autres couleurs. Avant que le monde, la lumière n'existe, le monde était dans le noir.